You're watching the most exciting game you will ever see on your TV set. Telstar by Coleco. Telstar handball, tennis, hockey. All three at an exciting low price. For great family fun, hitch your TV to a Telstar by Coleco.
I'm not really a big fan of online multiplayer games. I mean, sure, I was hooked on Apex for the first handful of seasons, but the thing that frustrates me about most online games is that they all want to be the only game you play. Like seriously, every game nowadays wants to become your second job, and I'm all about mixing things up and exploring the vast amount of options of games that are out there. So when it comes to online multiplayer, I typically steer clear. But don't get me wrong though, I'm not a complete and total hermit. Despite my love of single player stuff, I do have friends. And when we're hanging out, you can bet we're gonna dive into some cool local multiplayer stuff. Like always, my goal here is to put a spotlight on some underrated games and hope you'll stumble upon something that you might have otherwise missed. This time it's a mix, half things that you probably have heard about, and I'm thinking the other half you probably haven't. Alright, time to start with something that you probably didn't see coming. Hello Kitty plus Warlords plus Pong plus Windjammers. That's Sanrio World Smash Ball in a nutshell. One thing I really appreciate in a local multiplayer game is a simple to non-existent learning curve. I should be able to hand a controller to pretty much anyone and have them understand and click with it immediately. And this game fits that perfectly. It's a Japan-only Super Famicom game, but even if you aren't playing the generously fan-translated version of the game, you'd still be able to generally understand what's going on. Its simplicity can lead to some really accessible competitive sweatiness. I've seen this game control a room with the intense competition it can bring out in people. Everyone around the TV just kind of locked into the super satisfying thwacking sounds whenever somebody smacks away the spinning disc. This game can really be hypnotic. It has a good amount of stages that can be pretty chaotic and varied. It's the perfect sort of game you might want to play when everyone is just slightly out of their typical wits. I highly recommend it. So just set up your favorite Super Nintendo emulator and search this game out. It's always a hit. Tetris Battle Gaiden is another gem from the Super Famicom that was Japan exclusive. It takes the formula of classic head-to-head Tetris and adds an exciting twist. As a massive Tetris fan, I've played a ton of multiplayer versions of it, but this one stands out as my personal favorite. Like Sanrio World Smash Ball, most of the time I've had with Tetris Battle Gaiden over the years is in its untranslated form. But recently I got the fan-translated version that's available online, if you know where to look, and I actually think being able to read and understand each of the characters' abilities is probably the way to go, though I did have fun experimenting with the Japanese version and discovering what was going on through trial and error. It was kind of like a game in and of itself. Tetris Battle Gaiden is a Tetris game with character-specific abilities. These abilities can be categorized into offensive and defensive moves. Offensively, you can do stuff like darken your opponent's board, or temporarily disable their ability to rotate their pieces. Defensively, there's stuff like a counter that reflects offensive actions back at your opponent, or simply just clearing a few rows from the bottom of your board. Each character has a unique set of abilities that become increasingly powerful as you collect more magic. Magic is collected by clearing lines with the magic dots in them. Adding to the competitiveness is the shared preview of the upcoming pieces between the players. When you spot a piece that's coming up with a magic dot in it, it becomes a race to deny your opponent the chance to fill their magic gauge by putting it onto their board. The game does have some balancing issues with certain characters and abilities that are pretty under and overpowered, but with a reasonable group of people, you can always establish some house rules to keep things a little more fair. Visually, Tetris Battle Gaiden has some really charming character designs and great pixel art backgrounds. I highly recommend it to anybody who wants to play a fun, multiplayer, chaotic Tetris game. The Yawhg is a game that's like diving into a choose-your-own-adventure novel with a tabletop RPG vibe. It's a simple game that can be played with up to 4 players that unfolds over 6 rounds. Every round, each player gets to decide where their character spends their day and what they do there. These choices trigger all sorts of random events that shake up the character's stats, and might even throw in some larger-scale events that have game-changing consequences for the rest of the game for everybody. At the end of the week, there's a looming disaster that's coming, and it's called the Yawhg. And in anticipation for it, you've got to boost your character's skills. That way, when the Yawhg hits, you and your team are ready to take on different roles and help the town rebuild. The gameplay in the Yawhg is super easy. You just make choices from a dialogue box. It's perfect for local multiplayer lounging about, or even playing over a Discord call. You can get by with just one controller by just having everybody dictate what their choices are to you. My friends and I have tried similar games like the Monster Prom series, but they tend to be way too wordy and loaded with some pretty off-putting Reddit-y humor. The Yawhg, on the other hand, just keeps it short and sweet. Most of the turns are only a few sentences long, so you really don't get stuck slogging through tons of long paragraphs. Visually, the Yawhg is great. It's got a bunch of nice-looking, unique illustrations that go along with the different choices and events in the game. I recommend the Yawhg if you're up for a light visual novel RPG. It strikes the perfect balance with both having meaningful choices and being rather brisk. Nidhogg is a heart-pounding 1v1 fencing showdown that is incredibly easy to jump into and become pretty competent at in no time. It's a game that demands you to think on your feet relatively quickly, reminiscent of some intense fighting games, but without the steep learning curve. Nidhogg is a constant stream of rock, paper, scissors like choices and counters. Each player's goal is to sprint to the opposite side of the stage to offer themselves as a sacrifice to a colossal worm. The combat mechanics in Nidhogg are versatile with sword fights, sword throwing, and jump kicks. The simplicity of these mechanics is where Nidhogg really shines, and that sets it apart from its own sequel. Nidhogg 2 introduced a bunch of new mechanics and crazy visuals, but I think it went a tad overboard, taking away from the clarity of the original. Though Nidhogg 2's visuals are undeniably really cool, they can be pretty distracting from the gameplay. Nidhogg's strength lies in its straightforward design, offering players a clean and uncluttered game. Simplicity is the essence of the game. Admittedly, the respawn mechanics might feel a bit wonky at first, but with a bit of practice, you'll master the timing and strategy of when to chase down your opponent and when to respawn strategically ahead of them. Nidhogg is an absolute must-play. Its simplicity and split-second decision-making make it a game that you really have to try. Ultimate Chicken Horse is like Mario Maker but with a competitive twist. At its core, it's a platformer where the goal is to reach the flag. However, what sets it apart and makes it a real blast is the competitive aspect of it. The game begins with a relatively clean platformer level, but at the start of each turn, all the players get to add elements to the level from a random assortment of objects. Some are straightforward platforms, while others are treacherous traps. The goal is to make the level challenging enough that everyone else struggles while you can still make your way to the flag. If everyone manages to reach the flag, nobody scores any points. So it all boils down to slyly making a path through the level that's less perilous than the obvious one. Plus there are these coins that are sometimes amongst the random assortment of objects, or even just scattered on the levels just naturally, that if you're able to reach the flag with one, it grants extra points. It's always a blast trying to hide them where the other players won't spot them for sneaky extra points. Visually, the game is simple and cute. Well, that was until they introduced the monkey character who's unconventional. I highly recommend Ultimate Chicken Horse. It's a fantastic blend of competitive platforming and creative level design that's sure to keep you and your friends entertained for hours. Stick Fight the Game feels like a real blast from the past, taking those old stick figure flash videos that were popular on Newgrounds in the early 2000s and turning them into a chaotic multiplayer game. Up to 4 players can fight it out to be the last stick man standing, and then it moves on to another stage where it continues on like that endlessly. The game has a good variety of stages, some which introduce unique hazards that keep things interesting. What I think makes this game great though is its arsenal of weapons. You control your stick person's movements with the left stick, but the right stick gives you loosey-goosey aiming control. Stick Fight has a good range of guns and weapons at your disposal. The game itself is, I guess, a platform fighter, sorta like Smash, albeit with much simpler mechanics. As I said though, for games like this, less complexity is often a good thing, as not every game needs to have super intense technical depth. I recommend Stick Fight the Game for some simple stick figure mayhem that's perfect for casual multiplayer fun. Alright, those were just a few picks from my top local multiplayer games that I enjoy playing with my friends. And I've got a bunch more that I could talk about, so I might come back and revisit this topic later. If you have any recommendations for games that you love to play with your friends, feel free to share that in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, I've got a bunch of others that I think you'd find interesting. If you're into discovering hidden gems and exploring games that you might have overlooked, consider joining the 477 others that have subscribed. Alright, thanks for watching. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. Thanks for watching. Thank you for watching.